Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
Before the pen of scribes ever etched the Hebrew scrolls, before the ink dried on the papyrus that would form the Gospels, and before the Bible as we know it ever came into being, an ancient people in the Horn of Africa carried whispers of a prophecy, passed through oral traditions, sacred hymns, and carved into the rugged stones of highland monasteries. This prophecy was unlike any other in the ancient world. It told of a divine Redeemer, not of Roman complexion or Greco-Roman ideology, but of African birth, woolly hair, skin like polished bronze, and roots that plunged deep into the soil of the Nile and beyond. Long before Jerusalem became the epicenter of Christian messianic hopes, the highlands of Ethiopia bore a different vision, a black Messiah who would rise not only for the salvation of Ethiopia but for the spiritual awakening of the entire world. Ethiopia is one of the oldest continuous civilizations in the world, and its spiritual history stretches far deeper than most Western narratives are willing to acknowledge. Ethiopian legends, prophecies, and sacred traditions contain strikingly messianic elements that predate the formation of the canonical Bible. These beliefs were not simply borrowed from Hebrew or Christian thought. They were forged in the fires of Cushite kingdoms, Axumite temples, and ancestral voices that echoed across time. The concept of a savior, a divine emissary clothed in black skin, emerged organically within the Ethiopian cultural, spiritual, and cosmological framework. This messianic vision begins in the ancient kingdom of Kush, a civilization whose spiritual traditions would later influence both Egypt and Israel. The Kushites, ancestors of modern Ethiopians, were deeply connected to the spiritual world. They worshipped a supreme creator often associated with the sun, life, and divine order, a being that would send messengers to correct the moral trajectory of mankind. Among these prophetic utterances, preserved in the ancient Guizi language and in the oral chronicles of elders, is the belief that from among them would rise a savior, a son of the south, whose divine light would surpass that of earthly kings. This savior was not imagined in imperial Roman robes or with Hellenistic features, but as an unmistakably African figure. According to early Ethiopian lore, which was later inscribed into texts such as the Kebra Nagast and the Book of the Mysteries of Heaven and Earth, the coming Redeemer would emerge from the land of burnt faces, a poetic reference to the people of Kush. In these texts, skin color is not a marker of otherness or shame, but of divinity. Blackness is associated with spiritual strength, cosmic connection, and divine inheritance. It is in this context that the Black Messiah prophecy took shape, not as a political figurehead, but as a cosmic redeemer rooted in African soil and destiny. The Kebra Nagast, often misunderstood in the West as merely a national epic, is in fact a deeply theological work that weaves together Judaic, Christian, and indigenous Ethiopian beliefs. Compiled in the 14th century but preserving traditions centuries older, it presents Ethiopia not as a peripheral player in biblical history, but as central to the divine plan. According to the Kebra Nagast, the Ark of the Covenant, the holiest relic of the Hebrew faith, was brought to Ethiopia by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba Makeda. But what most overlook is that this narrative also introduces a lineage of kings and prophets who are destined to guard the Ark until the end of days, when a Black Messiah will reclaim it in a time of spiritual darkness and restore harmony to the world. This messianic thread reappears in the Book of Enoch, a text revered in Ethiopia and preserved exclusively in the Guizi language. The Book of Enoch is one of the oldest Jewish apocalyptic texts, yet it was rejected by the mainstream Western Church and removed from the biblical canon. In Ethiopia, however, it remains sacred and highly influential. Within its pages, there are cryptic visions of a coming figure referred to as the Elect One or Son of Man, who sits on the throne of glory and judges the fallen angels and wicked nations. While later Christian theology adapted this figure to describe Christ, Ethiopian interpretation maintained a more Afrocentric lens. The Messiah was never imagined as a Europeanized Christ figure. Instead, he was described with metaphors that reflected the local environment, towering as the mountains of Simeon, luminous as the Ethiopian sun, and strong like the Nile and flood. Ethiopian Christianity, which predates European missions by centuries, cultivated this messianic belief through its unique expression of theology. Unlike Roman Catholicism or Byzantine Orthodoxy, the Ethiopian Church retained many Hebraic practices, circumcision, Sabbath observance, dietary laws, and merged them with African cosmology. This fusion allowed Ethiopia to interpret the Messiah not merely as a foreign-born redeemer, but as someone who rises from within. Paintings in ancient monasteries from Lalibela to Debre Damo often depict Jesus with rich dark skin, Afro-textured hair, and African robes. These are not anachronistic depictions. They reflect a theological conviction that the Savior was and always had been black. Moreover, Ethiopian oral traditions speak of the second Zion, not Jerusalem, but Axum. This belief holds that Ethiopia is not just a land touched by the divine, but chosen by it. The New Jerusalem, in the minds of many Ethiopian mystics and sages, is not in the Middle East but in the mountains of East Africa. The Messiah, therefore, must arise from where God has established his new covenant. One of the most compelling traditions surrounding the Black Messiah prophecy is found among the Beta Israel, Ethiopian Jews, who have preserved their own vision of a future Redeemer. According to their oral accounts, a prophetic figure would rise from the line of David through Ethiopia, reclaiming the lost spiritual dignity of the house of Israel. This Messiah would not only liberate the oppressed, but also restore the forgotten spiritual balance between heaven and earth. The echoes of this prophecy resurfaced during the rise of Ethiopianism in the 19th and 20th centuries, when Black communities across the diaspora looked to Ethiopia as a spiritual homeland. From Marcus Garvey's proclamation, "Look to Africa, when a Black king shall be crowned, for the day of redemption is near," to the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie in 1930, regarded by some as the fulfillment of the prophecy, the belief in a Black Messiah rooted in Ethiopian soil transcended religious borders and sparked a global awakening. Rastafarian theology, deeply rooted in Ethiopian messianic tradition, hold that Haile Selassie I was the living embodiment of Messiah. For millions, he was the promised King of Kings, Lion of Judah, and Earth's rightful ruler. Though Selassie himself denied divine status, his legacy became a vessel for an ancient yearning, the return of a Messiah not shaped by colonial Christianity, but born of Africa's oldest faiths. Today, the Black Messiah prophecy remains alive in Ethiopian churches, hidden manuscripts, and sacred liturgies sung by priests in the early morning hours. It lives in the memory of those who see their reflection in the divine and in the hope of a future where salvation wears the colors of Africa.